Hi everyone. So today we're going to be going over an example of how to use rectangles to estimate the area under a curve. And in this example, our curve is a parabola, y equals x squared, from 0 to 1. And we want to use 4 rectangles and right endpoints. So using the area of rectangles is one way to estimate the integral from 0 to 1 of x squared dx. So once we find our area, our estimated area, it's going to estimate what this is going to be. So let's get started. We have our curve y equals x squared from 0 to 1. I have 0 here and 1 here. So I'm going to be estimating this whole area up until the dotted line using 4 rectangles. This means that my n is equal to 4. So when I'm given my n and my interval 0 to 1, I can figure out the spacing on my x-axis. So to do that, I'm going to have 1, which is my interval. I'm going up to 1, divided by 4, which is how many rectangles I have. So this means that the spacing on my x-axis is going to be 1/4. So starting at 0, I'm going to add 1/4. So that's where my first dot is going to be. And I'm going to draw my dot using a different color. I'm going to put a dot on the curve where 1/4 is. My next point is going to be at 1/4 plus 1/4, which is 2/4 or 1/2. And I'm going to put a dot on the curve at 1/2 right there. Next, 1/2 plus 1/4 is going to give me 3/4. And again, at 3/4, put a dot where my curve is. And then lastly, 3/4 plus 1/4 gives me 1. So I'm going to put, oops, wrong color. I already have my 1 here. And then I'm going to put a dot where my curve is at 1. So notice how I have 4 dots and my n is 4. So because I want to use right endpoints, this means that when I draw my rectangle, I want my dot, oop, you can't see that, sorry. When I draw my rectangle, I want my dot to be on the right corner. Okay, so that's what my rectangles should look like. So drawing my rectangles, I'm going to do it in how about blue. My first rectangle is going to look like this. Notice how my dot is on the right corner, just like that. My next rectangle is going to look like this, and so on. Keep going. My third one right here at 3/4, and my last one at 1. Okay, so now I have my 4 rectangles that I wanted with right endpoints because my dots are to the right corner of each rectangle. So now how do I find or estimate the area under the curve using the rectangles that I drew. I'm going to have area is equal to, so when I find the area of a rectangle, I use its height and I use its width. Notice how the width of every rectangle that I drew is 1/4, and that's where this 1/4 comes into play too. So for my first rectangle, I have a width of 1/4 times the height. The height of our rectangles is where it touches the curve, which is y equals x squared. So we want the y value of our curve. And this is going to be f at 1/4. Okay, so this is my width, and this is my height of my first rectangle. Okay, plus 1/4. My second rectangle, its height is f of 1/2, and that gives me the y value of this rectangle from this curve. Okay, plus 1/4 f of 3/4 is going to be my third rectangle, and my last rectangle is at 1. Okay, and when I calculate this, I am going to have a equals 1/4 times, and this is actually 1/4 squared, this whole thing right here. Okay, this is going to be, sorry, I'm just going to write it really tiny here, 1/2 squared. This right here is going to be 3/4 squared. And my last one gives me 1 squared, because my function that I'm working with is y equals x squared. Okay, so this, putting everything together, 4 squared plus 1/4 times 1/2 squared plus 1/4 3/4 squared, and my last one, 1/4 1 squared. Okay, and keep going. We just want to calculate what this is. So 1/4 times 1/16, because when I square this, I have 1 squared and 4 squared, and then times the 1/4 gives me 1/64, plus 1/2 squared is 1/4. 1/4 times 1/4 is 1/16, plus 3/4 squared times 1/4 gives me 9/64, plus 1/4, because 1 squared is just 1. Combining all our fractions gives me 15/32, and that is approximately 0.46875 when you use your calculator. So this means that the area of all of these rectangles that we use to estimate the area under y equals x squared is 0.46875, which is sort of close to 1/3, which is 0.3. 0.33. Oh, you can't see that. Repeating. Okay, so that's how you use right endpoints to estimate the area under a curve using 4 rectangles. And that estimates what this is. 4, 6, 8, 7, 5.